I knew I was in trouble the second he called me old man. We were 38 minutes into the third quarter performance review when Tyler, the new regional manager, with the charisma of a used car salesman and the ethics of a rattlesnake, paused his presentation. He tapped his laptop like he was summoning a demon and said, "Let us address the elephant in the room, shall we?" I was the elephant, apparently, and the room was packed with 24 people, including human resources, the chief financial officer, two interns who still thought the company pizza was a perk, and most of the board dialing in from glassy offices with $800 light fixtures and the emotional warmth of a dentist drill. "Robert," he said, oozing performative regret like syrup over a burnt waffle. "After a thorough evaluation, we have decided your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. No warning, no private conversation, no dignity, just a sudden career execution wrapped in a PowerPoint transition and a smug smile." It was the smirk that really got me. The kind that explicitly said this was not about my professional performance. This was incredibly personal. Tyler loved a captive audience. He adjusted his expensive designer tie and let the heavy silence thicken like old gravy before adding, "We appreciate your long service. Congratulations, you are terminated, old man." And just like that, I was completely done. After 11 loyal years, 3 different bosses, 6 major product launches, and 2 massive system overhauls, I personally saved from tanking, I was ejected like a broken paperclip in a restructuring memo. I stood there blinking at the large screen that had just switched to revenue pipeline forecasts, wondering if I just hallucinated the whole terrible thing. If you have ever been fired by an arrogant man who uses synergy unironically, you know the particular flavor of rage that violently bubbles up, the kind that tastes like stale break-room coffee and broken corporate promises. My ears rang loudly, my hands were ice cold. I thought of the massive project I just wrapped up early, of the bright intern I mentored, who was now staring at her shoes, like she desperately wished she could melt through the floor, of the unwavering company loyalty I had worn like heavy armor and how thin it suddenly felt against Tyler's absolute betrayal. I did not cry, I did not argue, I did not even speak a single word. I nodded exactly once, because if I opened my mouth, I was not sure what would come out. I calmly packed my things from the conference room, while Tyler pretended to care about pipeline variance. My email inbox was completely locked before I even made it back to my desk. My identification badge stopped buzzing me into the stairwell. I left the towering building with my potted plant and my dignity in the same reusable grocery bag. It was not until I got home, cracked a cold beer at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and stared at my personal laptop screen that I remembered the bonus memo. Specifically, Tyler's bonus memo. A month before the axe suddenly fell, I had been in a cross-departmental compliance review where the human resources director had, out of sheer laziness, attached a full document of executive compensation updates instead of the redacted summaries. And I, being a nosy senior systems architect with a sharp eye for fine print and a natural instinct for corporate survival, downloaded the whole thing. I did not even know why at the time. Just one of those little defensive instincts you develop after 52 years of life. I had skimmed it once, laughed loudly at the inflated numbers, and completely forgot about it until now. Until I remembered that specific clause, the one with the tiny asterisk next to his $3 million performance bonus. The clause about bonus eligibility strictly depending on adherence to internal compliance procedures and fulfilling corporate fiduciary duties as defined by the protocol guidelines. And I realized something incredible, something beautiful and horrible at the exact same time. Tyler had already broken it, and I had all the receipts. Tyler did not just fire me, he detonated his own massive safety net, and I was the only one who knew. Before that disastrous meeting, I had dedicated my entire adult life to this company. We started in a small, cramped office building near the industrial park, working out of a room that smelled perpetually of old cardboard and ozone. We built the entire server infrastructure from absolute scratch. I personally wired the first database clusters, spending countless sleepless nights making sure the cooling systems did not fail during the scorching summer months. I missed my daughter's piano recitals and my son championship baseball games because a client needed an emergency patch at 2 in the morning. I always told myself that the immense sacrifice was completely necessary, that I was building a solid foundation for my family's future. I was 52 years old, and my back constantly ached from decades of sitting in cheap office chairs, staring at lines of complex code until my vision blurred. I had foolishly believed that my immense institutional knowledge made me completely indispensable. I thought my deep roots in the company would protect me from the sudden storms of corporate restructuring. I was terribly wrong. I remembered the early days when our small team would stay up until 3 in the morning, ordering cheap pizza and debugging critical software patches. We had a genuine sense of camaraderie, a shared mission to build something truly magnificent. All of that history, all of that blood, sweat, and endless tears was completely erased by a man who had not even been with the company for a full 12 months. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly through my nose. No tears, no rising panic, just the slow, creeping calm of a seasoned man with absolutely nothing left to lose and a digital folder that had just become the nuclear launch codes. Tyler wanted to make a grand show of me. Fine. He just forgot that in corporate theater, there is always a devastating second act. It started that same afternoon, right after the numbness finally wore off, and the beer turned warm in my hand. I opened the old hidden folder, the one I had exported out of paranoia 3 restructures ago, the digital equivalent of keeping a heavy crowbar under your bed. I called it Random Documents, which in corporate speak means critical evidence I might someday use to burn this unethical place to the ground. In it were organizational charts from 3 vice presidents ago, budget approvals from when we still had a generous travel stipend, and bingo, the executive compensation memo. I clicked it open. There it was. A bland little file titled Executive Adjustments that looked like it was assembled by a robot who hated joy. Tyler's name sat in bold letters next to a paragraph that reeked of massive overcompensation. $3 million performance bonus. Tier 1 pending completion of strategic objectives, followed by a nauseating legal clause. Eligibility is entirely contingent upon uninterrupted compliance with all internal procedural protocols and the maintenance of corporate fiduciary duty, including but not limited to quarterly performance review policies and employee separation guidelines under Section 4. That was the very first crack in his windshield. But I was not about to get giddy over one simple footnote. This was the kind of thing that required surgical patience and the moral flexibility of a raccoon in a dumpster fire. So, I started meticulously building a timeline. I opened a clean spreadsheet, labeled it strictly confidential, and began logging absolutely everything. Meeting dates, long email chains, file attachments, review templates, human resources memos, and even the calendar invite for the quarterly meeting where he gutted me like a fish in front of half the organizational chart. Then I pulled up the performance review policy from the internal handbook. That thing had not been touched in years, but it still had serious legal teeth. I cross-referenced it with our current separation guidelines, which Tyler clearly had not bothered to read past the bullet points. That is when I found the explosive landmine. Any involuntary termination conducted outside of private compliance procedure, without prior notice and legal review, shall be classified as a severe protocol breach and a failure of fiduciary duty to the shareholders. If conducted by an executive-level employee, such breach immediately nullifies all pending incentive bonuses for the entire fiscal quarter. Let me translate that into real talk. If you fire a senior employee like a jackass in public, without proper documentation or advanced warning, you blow your own massive bonus to hell. Tyler had done it with absolute gusto in a public meeting with no documented performance warnings, no human resources mediation, and no legal consultation logged in the system. Just bad vibes and a fake apology smile. I laughed out loud, scaring my cat off the living room couch. Here is the thing about corporate policy. Nobody reads it until it is already way too late. Which meant if I marched in waving this clause like a victory flag, I would get laughed out of the building. Or worse, it would tip him off before the trap finished setting. So I stayed completely quiet. I went full ghost. I did not update my professional networking profile. I did not call anyone. I let the rumor mill do its thing. People assumed I was completely crushed. A few old coworkers texted half-hearted apologies. I replied with simple thumbs-up emojis and complete radio silence. Meanwhile, I kept digging deep into the archives. It was not just the clause. I found an email from Tyler 2 weeks prior requesting my presence at the third quarter review. That email became Exhibit A, showing premeditation for the firing with no mention of concerns and no warning. The drive home that afternoon felt like navigating through a thick, suffocating fog. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned completely white. When I finally pulled into my quiet suburban driveway, the silence of my empty house hit me like a physical blow. Both of my kids were away at college, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a mortgage that suddenly felt like a heavy anchor around my neck. I walked into the kitchen, the afternoon sun casting long, mocking shadows across the hardwood floor. I had spent 11 years sacrificing my personal life for a company that just tossed me out like expired milk. I thought about the massive, incredibly complex data migration project I had just successfully completed for our largest international client. It was a brutal, stressful endeavor that took 6 months of my life, and Tyler had taken all the public credit for it during the last town hall meeting. The sheer audacity of his betrayal burned in my chest. But anger is a useless emotion if it is not properly channeled. I needed to focus entirely on the cold, hard facts. I poured myself a very large glass of iced tea and sat down at my sturdy oak dining table. The wood was deeply scratched from years of my kids doing their homework, a constant reminder of exactly why I worked so incredibly hard. I could not let this arrogant executive destroy my financial stability and steal my massive earned dignity without a massive, calculated fight. I even found an automated reply he had sent to the legal department the week before that said, "Let us circle back after the quarterly meeting regarding Robert." That little sentence was absolutely everything. It explicitly meant he had not followed protocol before the sudden firing. He had not even notified the legal department. He had done it completely off the cuff, probably thinking it would make him look like a strong, decisive leader. Alpha male garbage power play by a guy who drinks expensive protein shakes with a reusable straw. He did not know it yet, but he had signed his own financial death warrant. And now I had to make sure the right powerful people eventually saw it without ever realizing I was the one behind it. This was not going to be a screaming match. This was not a social media call-out or a disgruntled former employee rant. No, this was going to be a fully compliant symphony, and every single note would be in his own handwriting. The true beauty of corporate sabotage is that no one ever expects it from an older guy sipping black coffee in a cardigan. Even though I was technically terminated, the paperwork had not officially cleared yet. Human resources had their usual molasses speed workflow. And because I was on a weird hybrid contract as a senior systems architect with transition privileges, they could not cut me loose without a proper exit review, system deactivation, and some lovely compliance formalities. Bureaucracy gave me a little crucial breathing room. I was a ghost in the machine, but I still had administrative access to the main server. And more importantly, I had Tyler's massive ego working overtime. He was not watching me at all. He thought he had already won the war. I logged in quietly through the back door. They had forgotten to close an old training account with elevated permissions I had created back when they still thought I walked on water. While they were busy planning fourth quarter retreats and ordering branded hoodies no one asked for, I was slipping through their internal system like a polite computer virus, leaving just enough breadcrumbs to look helpful, but never enough to draw any real suspicion. I started sending strategic emails, little things, innocuous, boring memos with long subject lines like standard operating procedure review, employee separation flowchart revisions, and corporate camouflage. Nobody reads those unless their name is on the copy line and their bonus depends on it. Inside, I carefully included soft reminders per Section 4 of the separation guidelines regarding fiduciary duty. Private meetings and legal review remain mandatory prior to any involuntary offboarding. Confirming verbal advisement is not considered compliant with procedural notice requirements. I was just flagging that the revised bonus structures are still heavily subject to internal audit reviews, especially in conjunction with leadership-triggered separations. Every single sentence was a surgical scalpel, every tiny footnote a hidden fuse. I signed them all cordially, like a good little employee, just trying to ensure smooth documentation flow during the transitions. And Tyler, he did not even blink once. He probably saw the email headers and thought it was just administrative junk. He deleted them with one hand while massaging his own grand illusions with the other. He had absolutely no idea I was slowly coating every surface of his shiny little throne in kerosene. Then came the absolute best part, the shared drive cleanup. If you ever want to erase someone without a trace, do not delete their stuff. Catalog it, archive it, tag it under compliance review, and let it rot in digital limbo. I flagged Tyler's bonus packet with a highly generic name, internal compensation review pending, and moved it to a shared human resources and legal directory with 50 other random files. It looked just like standard noise, but I knew exactly where it sat, and I made sure it had a clear breadcrumb trail leading right to his time-stamped execution of my career. The trick was never letting him hear the music until the cymbals crashed loudly. I kept my online presence completely quiet. Silence was the best possible camouflage. Tyler's management style was a masterclass in toxic incompetence. Ever since he arrived from some overpriced business school, he had completely destroyed our department's morale. He constantly implemented mandatory fun days that felt more like psychological torture, forcing exhausted engineers to participate in useless team-building exercises while critical server deadlines loomed overhead. He micromanaged every single technical decision despite having absolutely no engineering background whatsoever. He would demand daily status updates that took hours to compile, completely derailing our actual productive work. And the absolute worst part was his sickening habit of stealing ideas from junior developers and presenting them as his own brilliant strategic visions to the executive board. He was a corporate parasite, feeding off the hard work of the people he actively disdained. By taking him down, I was not just seeking personal revenge. I was performing a necessary pest control operation for the remaining employees, who were too afraid to speak up. I remembered watching him publicly humiliate a brilliant junior database administrator over a minor scheduling conflict, berating the young man until he practically resigned on the spot. Tyler thrived on creating a culture of absolute fear and complete subservience. He wanted an army of yes men, not a team of independent, highly skilled professionals. By week 2, Tyler had achieved full peacock mode. He strutted into meetings like he had just solved world hunger with a colorful spreadsheet. He started calling himself a turnaround specialist in cross-functional calls. He spoke about his own performance in the third person, as if we were all incredibly lucky to be orbiting planet Tyler. I watched one recorded town hall where he actually said the phrase, "We do not fire people, we elevate performance standards." He said it with a grin so wide you could park a large truck in it. I nearly threw my laptop across the room, but I kept smiling. On the surface, I was a perfect blend of graciousness and ghosting. I even sent Tyler a professional endorsement for strategic leadership just to keep the camouflage airtight. Meanwhile, my revenge folder was starting to look exactly like a pristine court exhibit. I had email timestamps, internal messages, meeting transcripts, and even a screen recording of our infamous third quarter meeting. Thank you. Corporate policy requiring all official meetings be archived for transparency. I clipped the exact moment his mouth formed the word terminated and paired it perfectly with the compliance clause he had shattered like a cheap wine glass. But the real gem came on a random Tuesday. An automatic notification popped up in my hidden inbox. Tyler had edited his bonus objectives document. He had uploaded a frantic revision to the internal folder, clearly trying to cover his tracks retroactively. The new file was almost identical, except the updated version tried to backdate his performance review documentation and included a clumsy file marked Robert Notice Draft with metadata, showing it was created days after the actual firing meeting. It was like watching a guilty toddler try to cover a spilled drink with printer paper. So I downloaded both versions, filed them under attempted cover-up, and then I sent a new memo. Hey team, just looping in legal to confirm the archival versions of all executive compensation documents are consistent with strict audit protocols. Totally innocent, totally boring. But I made absolutely sure to attach both versions of Tyler's bonus objectives file and added a polite footnote. Please disregard if already aligned with current documentation. Legal did not reply because they never do, but they definitely saw it. That was the entire point. A few days later, the call to my old lawyer happened on a Sunday's night. Richard, my attorney, and the only person who ever told me to bill for emotional labor, answered on the second ring. "Robert, tell me this is either about suing someone or finally starting a business." Option 1, and I have got undeniable documents. We met Monday afternoon at his office. Richard had represented me years ago during a previous downsizing attempt. Both times, he delivered results that made grown executives apologize through gritted teeth. I walked in with a secure drive, a stack of color-coded notes, and the expression of a man who has waited just long enough for sweet justice to feel earned. I walked him through the entire sequence, from the public firing to the outdated compliance clause. From Tyler's clownish attempt at retroactive document edits to the memos I had been strategically lacing across legal channels. When I showed him the original bonus agreement, the one with the sacred fiduciary duty clause, he stopped me mid-sentence and pulled out a yellow legal pad. "Voidability," he said, tapping it with his pen. "That clause is not decoration, it is contractual gunpowder. If what you are telling me is accurate, he lit the fuse himself. And the fact that he tried to fraudulently update the documentation after the event. That is not just messy, that is desperate, and a massive breach of fiduciary duty." We spent the next 2 hours crafting the final move. Not a threat, just a legal advisory memorandum, outlining potential compliance missteps and associated impacts to incentive structures. Language vague enough to avoid immediate confrontation, but sharp enough that any executive would feel the noose tightening. Richard's legal office was located in a renovated historic building downtown, featuring exposed brick walls and massive oak bookshelves filled with thick, intimidating legal volumes. Richard was a formidable man who wore expensive tailored suits and possessed a mind like a steel trap. He had spent his entire career destroying arrogant executives who thought they were above the law. When I sat down in his luxurious leather guest chair, he poured us both a glass of premium sparkling water and listened intently as I laid out the meticulous paper trail I had gathered. He appreciated my thoroughness. We spent hours going over every single potential legal loophole, ensuring that our advisory memo was completely bulletproof. Richard explained the intricate nuances of corporate fiduciary duty, detailing how a manager's reckless actions could legally constitute a severe breach of trust to the company's shareholders. By the time we finished drafting the document, it was a flawless masterpiece of legal destruction, ready to be quietly slipped into the executive workflow. I felt a tremendous sense of profound relief washing over me. For the first time in weeks, I actually felt like I was back in complete control of my own destiny. The heavy weight of the unjust termination was slowly lifting, replaced by the thrilling anticipation of absolute, undeniable justice. 3 days. That is exactly how long I had between delivering the legal memo and the quarterly board meeting that would either gut Tyler's bonus or cement him as the golden boy. 3 days to make sure the dominoes were positioned so precisely that one flick of the chief executive officer's finger would send them crashing. I emailed the board chair's executive assistant under the guise of following up on a previously flagged expense policy. I casually added a postscript noting that some legal governance updates might heavily impact how executive bonus structures were classified this quarter. I did not attach anything. I just hummed the right tune. Next, I added a subtle comment in the shared finance document regarding bonus eligibility verification for executive payouts, referencing the same policy clause mentioned in the memo. Tyler walked into that massive boardroom on Thursday like he owned the oxygen in the building. His hair was slicked back, his smile preloaded, and he wore that damn navy blazer he always wore when he thought he was about to make history. He brought expensive artisan coffee for everyone. The boardroom looked like every other corporate execution chamber in America. Gray walls, bad abstract art, and a polished wood table that smelled faintly of varnish and fear. I was seated quietly 3 chairs down from the head, my tablet open and my face completely passive. Tyler started the meeting with a terrible joke and launched straight into his presentation. Bullet points, buzzwords, and bar charts that meant absolutely nothing. Then he said it. "I would like to thank the board in advance for recognizing the hard work this quarter. I trust the bonus structure we discussed will fully reflect these excellent outcomes. He actually winked at the board. I said nothing. Then, the heavy wooden door opened. The executive assistant walked briskly to the chief executive officer, Harrison, and handed him a thick folder. The room shifted slightly. Harrison flipped open the folder and scanned the first page. He did not react immediately. Second page, third, page 7. His expensive pen stopped moving. He looked up, and for 3 full seconds, his eyes locked on Tyler like he was reading an obituary in real time. Tyler was mid-sentence when Harrison held up a hand. Let us pause there. The air tightened. Harrison turned to the junior legal counsel. This memo, he said slowly, tapping the folder, was this reviewed in advance? She adjusted her glasses and confirmed it contained a summary clause, pulled directly from Section 4 of the Executive Incentive Agreement regarding compliance, protocol, and fiduciary duty during involuntary terminations. Tyler blinked. What clause? He asked, trying to keep his voice breezy. Harrison looked directly at him. The one that governs eligibility requirements for your payout. Tyler stammered, claiming all separations were compliant to his knowledge. Harrison placed the folder flat on the table. Robert, he said casually, can you confirm the details of your departure? Every single eye turned toward me. I looked up slowly, my voice measured. I was let go during the third quarter performance meeting in front of the full team without prior notice, legal review, or human resources consultation. It is all on the official recording. Tyler chuckled nervously, claiming it was subjective. The chief financial officer cleared his throat. Did legal approve that separation? Tyler looked around wildly. I assumed protocol was followed. Harrison raised one eyebrow. Delegated to whom? Silence. Then came the absolute death sentence. We will need to thoroughly review your bonus eligibility in light of this severe breach of fiduciary duty. In the meantime, that item is tabled. Tyler's face froze in a polite half-smile that looked like it had been hit by a fast-moving train. The CEO reached over and called my lawyer, Richard, into the room. Richard slid the final folder across the table. It contained Tyler's forged retroactive documents and the time-stamped transcript. Based on documentation, Richard stated clearly, executive action constitutes a clear breach of Section 4. Therefore, eligibility for the $3 million bonus payout is immediately nullified. Tyler tried to argue, his voice hoarse, pointing a shaking finger at me. She is behind this, he yelled. I tilted my head slightly. I am a he, Tyler, I replied calmly, and I followed protocol. You did not. The CEO stood up, declared the bonus void, and adjourned the meeting. No one said a single word to Tyler. He remained seated, jaw slack, eyes unfocused. I walked out last, heading to the cafe across the street. I ordered a black coffee and watched as the board members filed out of the building. My phone buzzed with a message from Richard. It is completely done. He is toast. Enjoy the view. I smiled and took a long sip. You do not erase a senior systems architect mid-meeting and expect him to disappear. You expect him to break. What you do not expect is that he has been reading the corporate handbook the whole damn time, and he will gladly pour your own policies down your throat and watch you drown legally and decisively. That coffee never tasted so incredibly good. The tension in that boardroom was so thick you could practically cut it with a knife. The board members were a collection of incredibly wealthy, detached individuals who only cared about one thing, the bottom line. When Harrison, the chief executive officer, began reading the memo, I watched the exact moment the financial reality set in. $3 million was a massive amount of money, and knowing that Tyler had jeopardized the company's compliance standing made him an immediate, massive liability. Corporate loyalty only extends as far as the profit margins. The aftermath of the meeting was beautifully swift. Tyler was escorted out of the building by corporate security, less than an hour later, carrying his belongings in a cheap cardboard box. As for me, I did not return to the company. I took my immense skills and my pristine reputation to a major competitor, securing a position with a massive pay increase and the genuine respect I actually deserved. I finally had my life back. I could sleep peacefully at night, knowing that I had stood my ground against a bully and won. The very next weekend, I flew out to visit my children at their college campus. We went out for a highly expensive steak dinner, celebrating not just my incredible new job, but the profound validation of knowing that doing the right thing, standing up for your own dignity, and utilizing the rule of law will always triumph over arrogant corporate greed.